Hello. In 2021, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren ignited a plan to change military base names named after Confederates. She proposed an act of Congress establishing a naming commission to select new names for military bases named after our great Confederate leaders. The cost to change the military base names will be in excess of $60 million. In a surprise last minute recommendation, the Commission expanded its scope to include the disgraceful desecration of a grave site and 108-year-old memorial situated amongst and adjacent to graves in Arlington National Cemetery. The beautiful Confederate monument in Arlington Cemetery was erected to signify a reconciliation between the North and South after the Civil War. Of course, we call it the War for Southern Independence in the South. This century-old monument was the idea of President McKinley, a former Union Army officer, and it has been honored throughout the years by other U.S. presidents until now. After the end of the Civil War, our country reunited. Yet today, almost 160 years later, there are politicians, hate groups, and members of the media who are trying to undo our reconciliation. These groups are trying to destroy anything to do with the Confederacy, of which tens of millions of Americans are descended. We should never allow people like Senator Warren and the Naming Commission to destroy our Confederate monuments and change the military base names. At the base of this beautiful Arlington monument is the burial plot of Jewish Confederate Moses Ezekiel, who sculpted the monument. Senator Warren's plan to change military base names and destroy monuments is hypocritical, since Senator Warren is from Massachusetts, where slavery became the cradle of slavery and slave trading for America. Massachusetts and other northeastern states such as New York, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Rhode Island made a fortune off the slave trade industry. In 1641, Governor John Winthrop of Massachusetts legalized slavery in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And there's a statue of him, Governor Winthrop, in Boston and in the Statuary Hall in our nation's capital. And most Ivy League schools were funded by slave traders. For example, Yale University was named for Elihu Yale, a prolific slave trader. Massachusetts boasts that they ended slavery. But the truth is that an enslaved woman had to sue for her freedom, and her successful litigation is what ended slavery, not an outpouring of popular support or benevolent legislature. Former Confederate and Union soldiers united after the Civil War and fought side by side in the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, Korean War, and other battles. During those wars, former Confederates and Confederate descendants fought and achieved greatness. Democrat President Harry Truman was a member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. Sergeant York was the most highly decorated soldier in World War I. He received a Medal of Honor for killing 25 enemy soldiers and capturing 132. Likewise, World War II's Audie Murphy received the Medal of Honor for valor that he demonstrated at the age of 19 for single-handedly holding off a company of German soldiers in France. World War II's General George Patton Jr. was the most successful field commander in history. Last but not least were the great-grandsons of Confederate Generals Nathan Bedford Forrest and Stonewall Jackson. In World War II, Colonel Jackson was shot down over France, and Brigadier General Nathan Bedford Forrest III was killed in action in Germany. Without their Confederate ancestors, we would not have these brave and courageous American veterans who served and died for this country. And there were and are many other Confederate descendants who have served and given their all for this country. My Confederate ancestors, along with thousands of others, defended their homes and communities when the South was invaded by the armies sent south by Lincoln to fight other Confederates and destroy the homes, businesses, churches, schools, livestock, and crops of Southern citizens. The troops of Union General William Tecumseh Sherman burned down mills in Roswell, Georgia. The 400 young women and children working at the mills were arrested by Sherman's troops, kidnapped and put into rail cars and sent north to Kentucky and Ohio, where they were abandoned. Little is known about whatever happened to these 400 as they had to manage and try to find work as refugees. Some died along the way, and some had to give away their children as they couldn't care for them. Stories like this were common when Union troops mistreated Southern citizens, burned their homes, and stole anything of value. Items not pillaged were destroyed. An account of what happened to the lost mill workers that I just were talking about is in a book, The Women Will Howl, by Mary Deborah Pettit. And here's a copy of this book. Other horrors committed against Southerners is documented in Walter Cisco's book, War Crimes Against Southern Civilians. And here's a copy of that book by Cisco. And treatment of freed slaves was even worse. You might want to read Sick from Freedom to learn more about that. Our country has a long and complicated and honorable history with divisions, differences, and battles along the way. Our Confederate ancestors built this country and started businesses, formed towns, churches, schools, and fought in its wars. General Joseph Wheeler fought for the South and then again in the Spanish-American War and is buried at Arlington. Our country and its history is like a puzzle. If you remove a piece of the puzzle, you will no longer understand where our country has been and how it got to where it is today. There will be a hole where the piece of the puzzle belonged, and you will never know our nation's complete history. It is disrespectful and dishonorable to insult these men and women after they fought and represented this country so well. It would be shameful to remove or destroy the beautiful Reconciliation Monument to our Confederate ancestors in Arlington. And if they do, it won't be long before they dig up the 400 graves surrounding it. Those of us who have Confederate ancestors will not allow our ancestors to be disgraced in such a manner. Their existence and memory lives with those of us who are living and breathing today. Keep the Confederate Monument, Arlington, and the military base names. Please join the effort and call and meet with your representatives in Congress today. I thank you for watching and listening.